Hello, welcome to the February 11th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through as expected. And hang on a second, I just raised my... Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. So as I mentioned, my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the chat field, and and questions can also be submitted in advance by going to by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We will, when asking questions, if you could include information such as which version of Cubase you're running, LEAI, Elements, Pro, Artist, which version numbers such as 10, 10.5, 11, and which operating system, that information is helpful. And realize that my ability to answer questions in real time with the chat will not be possible. But I will try to get through as many of the questions in the chat in order. So if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could try to not ask the question over and over again, that speeds up the whole process. My family is at home during the live stream, and I have my sister-in-law and mother-in-law visiting, so you may hear some noise in the background, so I'll apologize for that. And also just wanted to let you know that we should have all the topics covered in today's live stream posted a few hours after the live stream. I have to go through and rewatch it and type up all the comments with timestamps, so you could just jump to particular sections. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, it's about maybe over 15,000 questions we've done. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to create that website for us. Two other people I want to call out, just give a quick shout out to for helping with moderation of the live stream, who can kind of do it in real time while I'm trying to ever so faithfully catch up to the questions. So I give special thanks to Jazz Dude and to Agent K for their works. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this out of the kindness of their hearts to help the community. And one other really useful resource of information that's available for Steinberg users is the Cubase Nation Discord. So check that out. I know Jazz Dude spends a lot of time compiling really useful and relevant information for the community. So special thanks to Jazz Dude for that as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we see Trond from Norway. All right, so we have Alex Morgan. So I just see question, how can one save controller lane setups in a MIDI editor that will work across projects? At the moment, when I save a preset, it only saves in that sequence or not others. Thank you. All right, so I thought that this would save across. So let's go ahead and give it a try. So I'll create a new controller setup. So let's say I want to see velocity. And for those that aren't familiar with this concept, is you may want to see particular controllers at the bottom all the time. So I'm gonna come over here. Let's do expression, modulation. I'll add pitch bend, and let's say sustain pedal. Okay, so let's say I now want to save this as a preset so that I don't have to load all of these up every single time. So let's say I will click on the plus sign here, and I'm going to, or I'll just click here and this little drop down arrow. And at this point, we will say, let's add a preset. So we'll call it Alex Morgan. And I'm going to go to a new project. So we created it in this project called Jump Off. I'll do a new project. Let's add an instrument track. Come here to our editors. So we'll see Alex Morgan. And now when we do this, we don't have enough space for that. So I'm going to go to Alex Morgan preset, and everything that we just created is automatically transferred across different projects and doesn't seem linked to the project, Alex. So let me know if I did something differently than you, but it seemed to kind of work as expected here for me. Okay, so we have a next question from JD Israel. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to have the drum map show all content in alphabetical order? So I don't know of a way to do that, and I'm not sure if it's just that you're looking for particular sounds. But if I wanted to come here, let's say we'll go to the particular track, I'll activate this project. And once we do this, I'm going to go to my inspector settings, and we'll just load up a drum map here. So I think I have one. It's already loaded up. So, we can take, the drum sounds, and, when we do this, it's actually kind of arranged by the MIDI note. And if you wanted to kind of flip that, you could click here, and you could reverse the drum sound list if you wanted to, but there isn't a way to automatically show it, for, tracks that are alphabetized. One other little visibility option. So let's say I have all that is within the drum editor. We have the option, and maybe if you are trying to find particular sounds easier, maybe you could just click on show drum sounds with events, and that will filter out everything. So even though it's not alphabetical, that you could still kind of find things maybe a little easier. So no way I know of that could alphabetize the drum map. And I haven't, but if there's a particular reason that you want it to be alphabetized, if you could let us know and I could pass that along. All right, so we see Mikkel. We have Matt Elliston checking in from London, Trance 2020. From Berkshire, UK, we have Benny from Sweden. And Benny is feeling better than previously, so that's good to hear. All right, so we have FJ Segovia, who I believe is from Madrid. All right, so I see a question from okay. So let me just see. Sorry, my chat field jumped to me already. All right, so you see a question from Mark Rabin. How to find out what preset I used for mixer channels / strip, EQ, etc. When I go to mix down, if I assigned a clean rock guitar preset strip, how do I know I used this preset? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's just see if there's... All right, so I'll just come over here. Let's just say... So let's say I will come over here. Let's just say we'll do like a tight rock preset. So let me see if it's indicated, like the preset name. So I think once you load the preset, you could come over, and so I don't think that the preset names will show up, but maybe if we come here and we wanted to have a different preset, and one of the things that you could probably do if you are using it to compare is to hold down Alt or Option plus, let's see if that will undo. So if you wanted to hold down Alt or Option plus Z or Alt Option plus Shift Z, at that point you could go back and forth. So I don't know a way where it shows the particular preset that was loaded, but you could load a different preset. Instead of Control or Command Z for undo, we can just go to Alt or Option Z for undo within the mix console setting. So if you are checking that, but you could always, if you had something set up, so that's between those two, but you could also just save the track preset as well. But I don't think there's a way of indicating which preset was loaded up after loading up a channel strip preset, if that's what you're looking for. And at this point, it might be good, like on that particular track, if you wanted to document, just consider using the notepad and say, use this preset so that you could document presets if needed as well. All right, so we have Nick checking in from Essex in the UK. Thanks for joining us. And we have Soren in Sweden. We see Jan from Cubase Index. We have Stefan from Sweden checking in. We have Michael from Melbourne. All right, so it says, I see a question. Hi, Greg, nice to see you again. If I don't have a job, I will be here listening to you every time. My question is, do you suggest a book or online training which covers Cubase 11? I haven't looked at, I haven't looked at any online trainings for Cubase 11. But I think, a wonderful resource is, is just asking whatever question you want here. And, how I would approach learning it is, just think of, if you have free time, you could just say, okay, I want to learn how to use the drum editor, or I want to learn the frequency EQ plugin, and learn one little aspect in a modular fashion. Because a lot of times I find that people tend to underutilize like something that's kind of set up for a classroom structure, and you may not want to necessarily learn every feature of Cubase. You want to learn the features of Cubase that are relevant to you. So, every day teach yourself a new keyboard shortcut. Every day teach yourself, somehow to, something that you're doing within your workflow, or seek out something that you think might be beneficial to your workflow. If you don't need to, if you're doing like EDM music or, all audio for rock or country, you may not need to know the score editor and MIDI editing. So, but, if you have a course, you're probably going to learn all of that stuff. So, figure out exactly what you want to do and just say, I want to learn this feature really well. I want to know everything about this one particular feature, and this is relevant for my productions. And then I think that sticks with you. And, watch different tutorials, ask questions in live streams as well. And sometimes, I think a lot of people learn from other people's questions in live streams. It's like, oh, you could do that. Interesting. So that's how I would approach it myself, but maybe other people could comment. I haven't had the need for Cubase 11, a tutorial or book. So, and sometimes by the time we get it out, they write the book because it's so comprehensive that the next version comes out as the book is just coming to press. Okay, so we see from the cube, I would like to make a melody in Retrolog's Arpeggiator, export it out into the project using the MIDI record function in Retrolog, export out an arpeggio with the same MIDI record function also. All right, so let's come over here. I think I have kind of a Retrolog. And let me just... Okay, so let's say if we wanted to work with the arpeggiator in Retrolog, so just come over here. So let's say we'll take this, and now we'll activate the arpeggiator, and let's just open up kind of a preset here. So let's say, okay, I want it to. So say I'll just kind of hold a chord down, maybe like an E minor chord. All right, so, and I'll just find. All right, so say if we have this, so, you know, what you could do, so it doesn't necessarily, I don't think that it will send this out in real time to MIDI, but what you could do is just click on the record. And I'll just play a couple different chords. All right, and now that we have, after we hit record, we can just drag this generated arpeggio directly into the project. And now as we look at it, we can just see the arpeggiator. Let me just not auto-quantize that, but as we work with this and just drag that particular, after recording the arpeggiator, that now we could drag that into the particular project. So, but it isn't kind of like, I don't believe it's set up like Groove Agent to automatically kind of take the output from the arpeggiator. And if you wanted to do that, you know, one of the other things that you could do is maybe just use one of the MIDI inserts. So if you wanted to do like, you know, maybe Apache SX, there's lots of different, so let's say we'll make this 16th note. And then once you have it through this arpeggiator, I know it's a different one, but this can be used with any MIDI. I could click on the record button, and as we record, so, and that will record the arpeggiator as MIDI data directly into it. So that's another method, but it doesn't, I don't believe that it works with the Retrolog arpeggiator in the same way. All right. We see Kerwin Young from Atlanta. Thanks for joining us. We have John Costigan. My chat field is actively jumping today, so bear with me. Okay, so we see a question from John Costigan. After exporting the acoustic agent mixer and effects from Groove Agent 5 into Cubase 11 Windows 10, what's the best way to render the individual wave files? Okay, so let's say, so if you're not familiar with this particular feature, so let's, I'll come over here and let's say I have my Retrolog and I want this to, we'll start this off kind of playing. So, and I want to, we'll have this particular pattern play. All right, so now once I'm here, I wanted to say we could take these different elements, and when we go to our kits here, so if I wanted to add more reverb on the snare, you know, or let's say on the snare here, we could do, you know, different inserts as well. But, you know, if I wanted to take this and we'll just say export mixer to, we'll say export mixer and effects to Cubase. So now once this is done, we'll look at our mix console. And now my kicks and snares and hi-hats are automatically just kind of broken down. So, and I believe that if we have this coming, let's say we go to forget the past here. So everything now is going to be kind of, you know, split into these individual outs. But we could come right over here. If we click like we're opening the automation lane on the instrument, here we could see like the kicks isolated. So it's kind of a hidden thing. So once we have multiple outputs on the instrument track, we could see those outputs directly here. So I'm going to just put this into record quickly. So this has kind of done the busing for us. I'm going to go to the MIDI track and we'll set Groove Agent as the input. So we'll just say so as we record, and I'll just solo this. So these are the outputs here, and I believe that once I have that set, that I can take this particular part, and I'll just stop the sequencer here. So we have this data here. And I want to, at this point, just say render in place. So we'll just say, okay, I want to use separate channels. And so now when I say render, we now have kind of our kick, snare, and all those different elements kind of just rendered out. So as soon as you do that, just select the event and do a render in place, and then you could just have all of the different channels split out into their own independent channels quite easily. All right. Any news on Cubase 12 release date? So generally, it hasn't been announced yet. When it's announced, we will show, we'll show you all the new features, but there hasn't been an actual release date announced yet. So, but I'm sure there's a lot of people in our development teams in Hamburg that are working really hard. Okay, we have a question. So we see Nick is just saying Happy Valentine's Day, that he and Cubase have been happy together for 30 years. That's great. I think I'm 31 or 32 years. So, all right. So we have a question. How can I set up a stereo track to record the main stereo out as a safe mix track, kind of like recording as you go, real time or offline too, like having a render in place for several tracks? So what a lot of people do in this case is, you could create kind of a pre-master group, and this is what a lot of people do for this particular scenario. So what I want to do is I'll take this particular file and I'll just revert the project quickly. So I could take all of these particular tracks in the project, and I'm going to add them to a group track. Okay, so now as we do this, everything's going to be routed. I'll do that again because I did it wrong. So I'm going to select all the tracks, and I'm going to add the selected tracks to the group channel. So group channel to selected tracks. All right, so now as we play, everything is now being sent to this bus. So what I could do now is at this point, if I wanted to, I could add a stereo audio track, and I could set its input from the group. So as I record, everything that I do can just be recorded. And we may want to mute that track, but as we record, so I'll just come right over here. So say, okay, I want it to. So this way, everything gets passed through that group, and then you could just simply have kind of a track that's always in record if you just happen to capture that magic somehow and you weren't in record. So send everything to like a pre-master group, and then at that point you could send that pre-master group as the input for a stereo audio track. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. Okay, so we see Michael Pierce is on the live stream, so glad you can make it. All right, so we just see second question, CC 121. This from, so it just says, can a fader motor be suspended momentarily to not have the noise during record or playback? So I think if you unplug the unit, so I'll just try it now. So let's say if I am automating, let's say a particular track. All right, so now I'll just come here. Okay, let's say I'll automate this track. So I could write my automation, but then when we rewind, if it's unplugged, the fader doesn't move. So you could just disconnect the power from the CC121 and the motorized fader won't work with the power disconnected. And if you wanted to, you could probably even, if you have like an Alexa in your studio, you could hook it up to a smart plug and say, turn off CC121 fader, boom. And you could probably set it up like that. But if the unit is not physically plugged in, you could, at that point, still use it to write automation, but turn the fader off. So it's not responding. All right, so we have a question. Hello, can you explain how to use the pencil tool to edit the volume gain on an audio track? All right, so if I'm here, I could just say, okay, we have our pencil tool. So if I wanted to just draw in different volume changes, we can just, with our pencil tool, as you click, it'll enter a node, and we could choose to enter, to move that node just like that. And let's see if we, I think if we, so that's going to be kind of node based with that. So once we have the pencil tool active, you could add modes. I'm not sure if we could take them away. Let's see if I hold down a modifier key, if that does it. So if you hold down the shift key, you could then actually erase the node. So again, the pencil tool to draw them in, the pencil tool with the shift key, you can then erase the nodes like so. So let me know if you need more information. And that's really kind of, people wonder why we have that. And it used to be what we called in previous versions, like in Cubase, VST days, they would call that dynamic events, and they would use that instead of automation. And some people still like that workflow. Most people, I think, have migrated to working with automation, but we can still do that, and that's all kind of pre-fader gain. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski checking in from Chico, California. All right, so I think I'm seeing a message about Antares Autotune Pro in French, maybe. But if you could ask in English, but I don't have a license of Autotune Pro on my work computer. So, but if there's something, a question that, or maybe someone else could translate to French for me. I'm just a dumb, ignorant American and not good with other languages. All right, so we have, I think it's Juha from Finland. Thanks for joining us and being a part of the community today. Okay, so we see for the wish list, bigger fonts for notepads, really bigger. So I'll pass it along, but sometimes then you can't put as many notes in. So, but I think that there might be a way. So let's say if we're in Notepad, and I think that someone, I thought it told me a trick, but like it may only be on Windows, but let me just see if we're in the Notepad here. That there might be like a scroll wheel function to zoom in and out, but it might only be on Windows. It might be part of the OS. So, but I'll pass it along. All right, so we have a question. If I do a project backup, is all MIDI data transferred with the project? It is. So the MIDI data will be part of the new project file that's created. So don't have any concerns with that. And if you wanted to come over here to your project backup to do this, and this is a great feature if you wanted to, consolidate your project. If you have audio files scattered all into different folders, the backup project will allow you to define a new folder. It'll create a new project with the MIDI information and copy all of the audio file needed for the project into that particular location as well. All right, so we see Sir Robert from Atlanta on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well. All right, Michael Pierce wants people to tickle the like button. It's always worth it, he says. All right, so we have a question from Richard James. Hi, Greg and all. Given the mastering tools available in Cubase, how mastering should I do on how much mastering should I do on the stereo out compared to with what I should do in WaveLab? So what I would tend to do when doing this situation, if I know that I'm going into WaveLab, I will try not to use, master effects processing that's adding gain. So, if I know that a particular project is going into a mastering process, I would try to avoid, limiters, maximizers, those types of processes, or maybe like a saturator where you're trying to really push the envelope or push the gain. I would tend to leave that for the WaveLab stage. Not everyone has a WaveLab, and if you don't, it's fine to put those in. But if you do have WaveLab, that's, I would tend not to utilize those in Cubase and try to make the mix as great as possible and not think about the mastering until I get to the mastering stage. And I've been in sessions with, where mastering engineers are called some of the best mix engineers in the world. And it's just like, and it's a awkward conversation. I've been in this twice where the mastering engineer will call and it's like, I think you could do it a little better. And then it'll make the whole product better as well if you get the mix right. Try not to mix into the processing. Try not to mix into the plugin. Try to make the mix as great as possible. And then it'll be easier for the mastering engineer and be easier to make your project, come through. All right, so I just see a comment from Jeff Sabelski. Says, I still think that the getting started manuals that used to be offered were terrific for beginners to get acquainted with the basic essentials of Cubase. So I think that there still is, let me just take a quick look, and it might be just kind of online as well. So let's just take a quick look here. Yeah, so it looks like it might be just the kind of the full manual. But a lot of times, you'll find that you'll have like kind of the web help versions, but I'll pass that along for the documentation team. See, just a great comment. Some of us like to make music, some just like watching people make music. So I think we see the same thing with computer games, where I was having a conversation with one of the other fathers at my son's bus stop of, and he just can't understand why his son doesn't want to actually play the game, but just watch people play the game on YouTube, why that's more interesting. So very passive approach. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, any way you could demonstrate how to set up MIDI program changes for line 6 Helix native? So I don't think that, it really depends on the, so I'm not sure if I don't think I have the Helix on my computer. I have it on my personal machine. So I don't really have it to work with. So, not all plugins will respond to program changes, but if you want it to send program changes to the plugin, so we would come over here. So let's say, in the plugin data itself. So a lot of times, you know, if it does respond to MIDI, like the hardware, what we would do is come over here and just, you know, send a MIDI track. So, you know, because program changes are set to MIDI. So, you know, and we could, so if with a hardware device that responded to MIDI program changes, we'd set up a MIDI track, set the correct output port here. So let's say, okay, it's connected to my UR24C. And at this point, we could double click and just enter in program changes. So you could just say, okay, at this point, it goes to this program change. So we could just enter in program changes. Sometimes when devices are set to respond to program changes, they will have a MIDI input driver. So let's say if I wanted to have an audio plugin on this track, so I go to my inserts and I enable Loop Mash FX. So we could come over here. So I think it's under Other. So now as soon as we enable Loop Mash FX, we could come here to our, and we could add a MIDI track. And then we could send the program, we could send MIDI messages to Loop Mash FX. So as soon as we wanted to come here, we could now just have, you know, the MIDI going directly out to Loop Mash FX on that particular port. So that's how we could do it. But, you know, sometimes there may be just, you know, a lot of times many plugins, VST3 plugins, don't respond to MIDI program changes, and it's just how it's kind of set up. And since it's not an instrument, you know, it could be hard to do that. But see if once you add that, if, you know, you'll see just the outputs showing up here, you know, for, you know, when we look at this, we can say, okay, I want to take the outputs from the, you know, from this into Loop Mash FX. So you could then get MIDI into the plugin so it responds to it. And, you know, just make sure that the actual plugin responds to MIDI program changes. So a lot of times, you know, audio programs don't. So just see, hello, why is there no translation in Arabic, or is there an explanation in Arabic? So unfortunately, I don't speak Arabic. I wish I was more, I wish I was proficient at other languages. I speak just a little bit of English, but usually we try to keep the live streams under 4 hours. Sometimes we're a couple seconds or a minute over, depending on the live stream, but generally we try to stop at 4 hours because YouTube will, as part of the when you go to watch the live stream, that you could have it translated to different languages. So I haven't checked to see if it is translated to Arabic or not, but I know that there's lots of people who do that. So I apologize that, you know, I don't speak Arabic, and I'm not, you know, and I'm sure that there's Steinberg staff that do, but they don't do the live streams, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Okay, so just see the license has been upgraded successfully. Now tell me everything about WaveLab Pro 11, and thank you very much. So once you have that, you know, some of the significant things with WaveLab 11 was, you know, the ability of, you know, automating, you know, some like two of the big things for me were, you know, having multi-channel files. So you could have a 5.1, a 7.14, or 22.2. You know, interleave file support for editing and mastering, and also now being able to automate different plugin parameters. But there are kind of, you know, consistent live streams that Justin Perkins does. But if you have like a particular question, let me know. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from John just saying, is the reason to use render in place, is it to attach an audio sound to MIDI so that I can use an audio track instead of just MIDI that I don't have a sound for it? So what, there's a lot of different uses for render in place. One is, if you have MIDI information and we wanted to quickly turn that into audio. So let's say someone came over with a USB E licenser and they had a plug-in. You're like, oh, it's amazing sounding. And the license is on the USB E licenser. And when they leave, you're not going to have that sound. So you could just simply come right over here and render that instrument to audio. Many times people will also just use this to save CPU resources. Maybe they create such a complex sound in a big heavy instrument, maybe like a big Howlian layer, and as they're playing it, it takes too much of their CPU, so they'll render in place so that the system is just playing back an audio file instead of doing all the computations to create that large, intricate, dense, CPU heavy sound. So playing back an audio file is pretty minimal on CPU compared to like a really, like a really dense instrument with lots of different elements in it. So those are kind of the main reasons. But, sometimes people use render in place. If I've done 400 edits on a particular file. So let's say I have come here, like just for audio, and, we've done like painstaking crossfades and fade ins, fade outs, and, clip gain, automation. So I just do this, and, and if I accidentally moved one, that could mess up all of my edits, so people will sometimes render in place just to have a clean, consolidated file. So that things can't get messed up, especially if you're working with other people. You may want to make it as hard for them to screw up your project as possible. And a lot of people will get work because they know how to make the files open up for other people that are working in the process, so that, it's not a hassle. So, if you lost a particular plugin also, so sometimes, if you, let's say you had a 32-bit version of a plugin and that it's not going to work, you could just, if you had it up and running on a wrapper, but it's kind of maybe a little naughty and misbehaves, that at that point you could just render in place and then not have to worry about using older plugins as well. So you see a comment from John Costigan, just says, thank you, Greg. So this Groove Agent 5 export and import is new to me. So yeah, it's very powerful when you work with that. Okay, so we have a question from John. It says, sometimes I get the audio sound locked up continuously. How do I reset or mute all and start over? So I think if we go to the studio menu, let's say we go to the audio system, I think there might be a reset. We'll just see if there was one. So I think that if you go to the audio system and click on reset, that might do the trick right there. Something else that you could do if it's like in a kind of hang, sometimes resetting the buffer size of the audio interface can come over here and allow you to kind of reset that as well. And if it's just kind of doing it, in a very annoying way, is, if you have the control room active, is, you could just mute the control room or, you know, turn the talk back on, or, you know, something else to kind of get the volume down switch to a different set of speakers, and that could help. Okay, so we have a question. Can you show how to make a macro that would delete all the audio tracks with no content? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so I think we might be able to do this in a project logical editor. Okay, so we want to say media type is equal to audio, and so under function we'll start with delete. All right, and let's choose our property is set to event is empty. All right, so I'll just add some empty audio tracks here. Okay, so, yep. All right, so that worked. So all you have to do, go to the project logical editor, and we want to say media type is equal to audio, property, and then property is set to event is empty, and under function delete. So now if we wanted to come here, I have empty tracks. I'll just add a couple more empty audio tracks here. And then I'll just hit apply, and now all the empty tracks have been erased. So I'll save that in case I need to use that one later. And I'll save it as delete empty audio tracks. So give that a try. Let me know if that works for you. All right, so a question from Steve Allen. Great to see you on the live stream. It says, hi, Greg. Multi-outputs in Groove Agent instrument track, trying to change the first output name to say kick, but it always changes the main MIDI track name to kick 2. Am I missing something? All right, so let me just jump back to our other project. Okay, so let's come over here, and I assume that this is with an acoustic agent. All right, so let's say we're playing along here. All right, so we have this. Is not working. May have to plug my mouse in here. Sorry about that. me see if I could. All right, so my mouse plugged in. Sorry about that. All right, I have to remember to charge my mouse and keyboard before a live stream. Okay, let's just get back to this question. So trying to change the first output name to say kick, but it always changes the main MIDI track name to kick to. All right, so okay, so I think what you might be able to do with this, and let's take a look. So say if I just do right click, and we'll say export mixer and effects to Cubase. That once we've done this, we'll see that, you know, like right now, when we look at the particular instrument, that the kicks, this will be kind of automatically done for you. So I think it'll maintain kind of a stereo out for the first output. But if you want to, you know, so just by doing that now, this will kind of automatically, you know, maintain the names for you. So you'll have an output, and, you know, there could be other stuff like ambiances or, you know, rooms that might be still fixed into the main output. But if you do this, the kicks will go to the kick track, and the snares to the output labeled snares. And I just see, but and just in the question from Steve, but it always changes the main MIDI track name to kick to. Am I missing something? So let me know, you know, so if you're doing it that way, but let's say if I undo this function in the editor, maybe it doesn't like that. So. Restart that project quickly. Just get this project back up. Okay, so now that we're here, let's say we'll go to the instrument. Okay, so let's say if I switch this from the kit mix, let's say to out 1 or out 2, out 3. All right, so, and let's say if I have the pattern out here, so and let's say if I render this, all right, so when we come here, we could see kind of the name of the kit here and like our kick. So as we turn this up so you can hear it a little better. And let's say, okay, now the snares. So I think if we, you know, try to use just the kind of the main output, you know, leave like the primary stereo out, and then maybe from the second one, start using that for the kicks, that it'll work better for you. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we see Michael Pierce says, I love using submix. A submix lets you set up some really interesting routing and effects and for mixing as well. Well, it's in my template anyway, so it's good. And you could also do some interesting parallel stuff on your bus as well. All right, so Mark Raymond saying show your gratitude and hit the like button. So yeah, if you learned a new tip or trick, try hitting the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. All right, so I see a question from Sable. Is anyone here a Recording Academy member? So I'm in Recording Academy. So if you have any questions, you could email me. Okay, so we see. Okay, so it says question is from John. So it says, can you please show one more time, show me how to add a CC variable after recorded MIDI tracks. So recorded the CC variable, CC11, CC21, etc. on top of the track that does not have any dynamics. All right, so let's say if I wanted to just come here. So let's say I'll just switch instruments quickly. All right, so let's say I'll just play this one string part here. So I'm going to record one string note. All right, and we'll record a long note here for about 4 bars. Okay, so now when I record, there's different recording modes. So if I wanted to come here, when we do linear cycle recording, I could choose to add new parts on top. So if I wanted to record the, like, let's say modulation or CC11, whatever data, this could place it as a new part that is on top of the part, but it's not in the part. Or we could choose to merge the event. So this way we could merge the recorded information. So if I want to record like the MIDI CC and have it go into this part, I would choose merge. And if I wanted to replace, I could hit when I hit record, whatever's underneath will get replaced. So if I want to do new parts, I'll come right over here. And I can move my modulation wheel to get expression. But when we do that, we can see that this is a separate part that's over top of the pre-existing part. So I'm going to undo that change. And let's set my MIDI record mode here to merge. So now as we play that one particular part and I record, that now we have kind of one event that has the MIDI note and the CC data. And if I have it set to replace, that as soon as I hit record, that now the underlying note is going to be replaced. And as soon as I'm just moving up and down. So now when I record, the actual note is no longer there because I replaced it by recording. So if you want to merge the, I would think that it would be easier to merge, to select merge in our linear and cycled recording, because then you have one part that has the notes and all the CC data and you're not kind of worrying about it. Or new parts, they're going to be stacked. You could use the Option or Alt key with a glue gun to then merge after. But if, it could be just cleaner just to put it into merge. So let me know if that helps. If that answers your question, John. my chat field jumped to me, so I'm just finding my spot where it was. Okay, so I think I'm in the neighborhood where I was. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to automatic compensate gain on a track when add a plugin inserts not to be fooled by loudness? You know, if you, so I guess it's, you know, as we have like an audio track playing, so let's say if, you know, we want to do this, you know, so often when adding different plugins, so let's say if I'm playing this particular part here, what you could do, you know, if you're really concerned about it, you know, so there isn't a way to automatically, you know, when you, as you put in plugins that can change the gain to maintain the gain position at a set value, unless you put in like a limiter plugin on it. So if we want to take this, we could probably go to the inserts and let's put just a quick limiter on. Okay, and let's say our limiter, you know, we could set our, you know, our output gain to minus 1.1. So now whatever plugin that I do to add gain, such as maybe, let's go find, just find the one I'm thinking of. I think it's under distortion, sorry, Magneto. So if I come here, that we could, you know, so the limiter will now kind of squash the gain of it at a certain point. So, you know, but there isn't kind of an automatic way of doing that, and it would probably be a bad thing because, you know, often you're inserting those particular processes, you know, for that desired effect. So, you know, just be conscious of when you do it. But if you really want to work that way, you could have the limiter set into your master bus or into the channel if you wanted to. All right, so we see Michael Pierce's soup selection of the day: roasted asparagus with potatoes, sauteed onions and garlic, and a handful of spinach, served with Parmesan crisps, croutons, and a poached egg, if that's your thing. Sounds good. Thank you for the soup recipe there, Michael. Look forward to those every Friday. Pretty soon we'll just, it'll be summer for a lot of us, and we'll be back into full ice cream mode. So. Okay, Nick wants people to stop talking about food. We're turning into the Cubase Chef's channel. All right. All right, so we have a question. Greg, can you please show us how to export all channels without changing mono to stereo or vice versa? I mean, conserving mono and stereo channels as they are. All right, so I'll just do this quickly. I'll just do a new project. And really all you have to do is, you know, it kind of follows the signal flow. So let's say if I come over here, all right, and so I'll just find a quick mono guitar part. right, so let's say we have a mono bass here. All right, so let's say we drop that in. Okay, and I'll just put these into both to be in musical mode. Okay, so let's say we'll have a really awkward. All right, so I wanted to like do a batch export and be able to have these files maintain their stereo channel width. So let's say we have a mono bass and stereo drums. So to do this, I will come over here and just say, let's do an export audio mixdown. And the setting that you want to be on, so say I want to do multiple, so I want it to do this, and we will choose on our effects disable dry. So at this point we could export our audio mixdown, and I probably didn't put it into the file, so let me just do it so we could export it and feed it directly back in. So we'll just say, or we'll create audio tracks of these. So this way we could have the stereo track is stereo, the mono track is mono. So when we do this, we could just come right over here, and when we do the export audio mixdown, you want the effects to be disabled. And I think that we could also do this, and depending upon the effects. So if you're running it to like a stereo effects end, then it's going to automatically go. But let's see if we do inserts and strip, this might also work. Yeah, so if you do inserts and channel strip, that will also work. So doesn't, no, that might be stereo. So try just to put this as dry. So when you do your export audio mixdown in the effects, choose dry. That will keep your mono tracks mono, your stereo tracks stereo. Okay, so we just see a question for the man. The best way to create strum. So, there will be, different, arpeggiators, but if you wanted to do that you could utilize, but, let's say if I was on particular projects, let's say if I wanted to come and we'll go to the chord track. Right, and let's say I have just some block chords. And we have these on a Rhodes part, and I'll join these together. So one easy way of kind of doing this is, like when we're looking at the MIDI editor here, is you have a kind of a trim tool, and hold down kind of the Alt key, and then you could trim kind of just the beginning of different clips. So now as we do this, and I'll set that back to a different patch so we could hear it a little better. Sorry about that. All right, so once we have this kind of done, so we could double click, and at this point I'll just say, okay, I want to take just the trim tool and hold down the Alt key. And then you can so you could kind of roll the chords like that if you want. And, you know, many of the instruments like Howling and Sonic, the full version will have built-in arpeggiators as well. Okay, so we just see a question. Will there be changes to video export? So I can't really comment on any you know, feature changes with Cubase 12. So we'll have to wait and see when it comes out. But I know a lot of people want the ability to have different like qualities. So you can have smaller file sizes. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you show how I can use Expander on the kick drum and other kits showing which parameters do what to the sound? I know you showed it a little last time. So a lot of times what I would tend to do, like, you know, for drums, and I think maybe what I showed the last time might have been the envelope shaper. So let's say if I come back to this particular project, and I wanted to take all of my drums, and all my drums are going to be, let's say, routed to a drum bus. So I could do this individually, but this often works really well just on a group. So we'll add a group channel to the selected tracks. Okay, so let's say, and we could do this in the channel strip under tools. You can see the envelope shaper. So we could adjust the attack. And then you also have the length. So if you want the drums to sound really, or let's say, okay, I want these to sound really tight. Or let's say, let's adjust the release. And you could also kind of see more of these functions when you go to, like, under dynamics to the envelope shaper, and you could have a multi-band envelope shaper as well. So same. So now we're running kind of two stages of it. So it's, and say we want to bypass these. So just turning on that can make a huge change with the drum. So let me know if that's what you're thinking of. But again, check out the envelope shaper for that. It's a wonderful solution. I know people have used it on master buses as well. Okay, so we just see question. When I export an audio mixdown, I have to keep shrinking the window to see the export audio button. How can I set the size of the export audio mixdown window so I don't have to do this? So, often, like I'm running at a 1920 by 1080 resolution. So when I go to my export audio mixdown, it kind of fits very comfortably, and I could, resize like from the bottom up if I needed to see less. And I think I could do this also. So if you haven't done that, so, if you could tell us what screen resolution you're running. I know sometimes, I get this question a lot from people who have like a 13-inch MacBook, and their screen resolution, is not set to the highest level. So, check if you could indicate what your screen resolution is. That would often just kind of, changing the screen resolution. I think sometimes if you have the export queue open, if you close the export queue, so when we have this, if I open the export queue, you'll notice that it gets bigger. So, but we could resize it, and you might be able to squeeze more real estate out of the screen with your export queue collapsed in view. So if you could let us know if you tried collapsing your export queue as well as what screen resolution you're on, that would be helpful. And I know sometimes on the Mac, you go to the screen resolution and it's just like big, medium, small, so it's not very helpful. Okay. See, Michael Teams has granted John Costigan 8 scoops of Blackberry's ice cream. So that's good. Okay, so we have a question: how to play sampling instruments, monophony and legato style. So probably in mono in style. So let's go ahead and take a look. I think I have a project that we could share this. Okay, so let's say if I have I think. All right, so now I have like a bass sound. And let me just think I may have one that's. Okay, so say I just have a bass sound. So when you come over here, I could play chords if I wanted to. So, but if I wanted to play this in mono, we're in monophonic mode. We see this little icon here. So now when I go to play a chord, it's only going to play. It's only going to play one voice in monophonic. So, and we have a lot of people that want to do this kind of coupled with glides. So if we wanted to go to the pitch, we could adjust our glide amount. So if I want to play, but if I adjust my glide here, now I could just, and I'm just going to hold down the key and hit the next key. So as soon as I hit this second note, it'll start playing the sample again and glide up to the pitch, and the speed will be set here. So I hit a C, and a C an octave higher. But sometimes you may also want to not re-trigger the start of the sample. And so if I do this, I could, in the middle of the sample, change the pitch without the sample. And when I hit the second note, and we could look at the keys here, it'll continue to play without having to restart this sample from the beginning of the sample. So I go. So you could do stuff like that. So once you have the sample in, just come here, activate monophonic mode, and then you could activate the legato mode, and you can set the glide speed here. So if I just want to come. So you can have a lot of fun for doing kind of 808 style glides very easily with the sampler track. All right, so we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. All right, so a question from Benny. Does it make any difference if I render in place or bounce an audio file? Is it better to use render in place? I use bounce 99% of the time. So, you know, you can't bounce an audio file. There kind of could be different use cases. So, you know, when you do a bounce selection, that could, you know, if we had like a bunch of edits here, you know, we could bounce selection and replace the audio directly there. All right, so we do that, and that's going to take the audio file and maybe consolidate the audio file. So if I have these selected and I go to my audio to bounce selection, at that point, now we have one contiguous audio file, and that's fine. But what render in place is going to offer is not only that, but I could bounce the selection with processing. And this is kind of the big difference. So I could say, I want it, you know, this to be, I want it to include the EQ, the channel strip. I want it to include the effects ends. I want it to include the master effects. I want it to have a tail so that the reverb that's on the file could be extended out. So when I render in place, that reverb is captured and not just like a cut off, like a and we could choose to put it to different locations. I could choose to mute the source events and keep that there. So, you know, think of render in place. You know, if you just do a bounce selection and select this and do render in place, you can get the same exact results. But if you need to incorporate different signal processing of the mixer, you know, the volume level, including automation, that's when you would need to use render tracks instead. All right, so we see it from Jess Sabelski, and I think we discussed this a bit in the last live stream. Just saying a composer's MIDI project with orchestral parts had MIDI tempos, but on import had no tempo track visible until I added it, and voila, there they were. And I need to record oboe on it now. So have a, you know, yeah, so if you import a MIDI track, it won't automatically turn the tempo track on because some people don't want to see it. They just want it to be turned on. So so we just see, hi Greg, is there a place to get more project logical editor presets? So I know that I recently had sent over a bunch of presets that I had created to Steinberg, so I'm not sure if they're going to be in, there's a good chance that they might be in the next one, but if you have, I'm happy to share any project logical editor presets if you want to email me at clubcubase at steinberg.de. All right, so we just see every question of 150 Hangouts indexed. Makes me tired thinking 150 Hangouts, so I guess we'll be approaching our 2-year anniversary of pandemic Hangouts. So, all right, so we see Nick joining us. All right, so just see from Michael Teams, and I saw this in person when I remotely logged on to Michael's computer once. So still have the issue of non-responsive top menu, only responds after 20 or 30 clicks on a menu item. So the one thing there's two things I would try, Michael. You know, I was thinking about this and I should have reached out to you. But one is to start the program with the preferences disabled, and you could do that with like, you know, Alt Control plus Shift, or on the Mac it's Command Option plus Shift. So like start the program and hold those keys down and see, you know, you'll be asked if you want to disable the program preferences temporarily, and choose that and see if it makes a difference. And also if you could let me know, and you could do this via email, if there's a particular what video card you're using and what driver you're using. So sometimes stuff like that could be video card related with drivers. And I think that you've done some stuff with Jazz Dude, and he's, you know, I'm sure he would have gone there as well. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, just question. I know popular music is usually 4/4, and Groove Agent 5 has a zillion to choose from, but looking for a jazz 3/4 time, there aren't any at all. So there are some additional jazz kits that you could utilize. So let's take a look and say, okay, I want to come to, just add a quick Groove Agent track here. And I have some of the add-on packs, but you know, there's two really good jazz expansion kits. And if you know, you could probably spend 14 hours programming jazz drums really well, or just, you know, spend $60 or whatever on the expansion kits. So let's say if I wanted to come over here. So the ones I would think of is going to be, let me see if I have the jazz ones on here. So I know I have the Simon Phillips jazz drums. So as I just wanted to come over here, so now let's say if I just wanted to look, come over to the meter here, I'm just going to say 3/4. So there's some jazz waltz patterns. So let's say if I just wanted to load up that kit. So now when we come here, this Simon Phillips jazz. So this is our intro. So let's say, okay, we'll come here now. And then we could make it more complex as well. And not only do you have a Simon Phillips kit, but Simon Phillips playing patterns for you as well. So you could, if you want to spend a lot of time, program all of those, or you could just kind of, you know, get the different jazz expansion kits, and they will have some 3/4 patterns as well. So it's like, you know, I've done lots of drum programming over the years where we have, you know, brushes and all these dynamics. You could do it. It takes a long time to do, you know, and if you wanted to come here, just say, okay, let's. And to get the ambience right. So, so, you know, check out maybe the Simon Phillips jazz drums. I think there's a lot of great stuff in there, especially if you're doing 3/4 stuff that you could work with. All right, so we see, will Machine work with Cubase elements specifically? What would be the limitation? So I don't have a license of Machine or the hardware, but, you know, it just kind of runs as a VST plugin. So I don't think that there's any limitations, in the controller, like the drum pads will just work as like a standard MIDI drum pad. And I think it works obviously more tied into Machine software, but I don't think that there's any issues running Machine inside of Cubase, just seen as a plugin and as a MIDI controller. All right, so we just see, will Cubase 12 run on Mojave, or will I have to upgrade? So they haven't announced the officially supported OSs yet. But it could be a chance that it may not run on Mojave because they're spending a tremendous amount of time, especially on M1 processing and M1 native support. So, and a lot of times, sometimes the older versions of OSs, and it could be that it may run fine, but they may not go through the 22,000 quality test to to operate to certify the operating system. So, but as soon as it's out, we could give it a try. And I don't think I have Mojave anymore on my system. All right, so see, Michael Pierce is checking off to do some teaching, so it's a good thing of Michael to do. Hope to see you back. All right, so Captain Energy Music is saying for Valentine's Day we should click the like button, so that's good. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, will be available multi-track free audio warp in Cubase Pro 12. Thanks, Mirko. So I can't really comment on new features of Cubase Pro 12, but that's a common feature request, so we'll see if it makes it in there. All right, so we have Brianna from Youngstown. Thanks for joining us, being on the live stream today. Good to see you back. Okay. All right. So just see for Michael Teams, and this is directed to Mark Rabin, says using one monitor, this time high resolution on the monitor, think 3450 by 2300. So, it seemed like you're running a much lower resolution, Michael, when I was remotely on your system. So maybe if you go to the high DPI scale and see, you could do it in Windows or under preferences in general in Cubase and see if that's set up. But it seemed like you're running a much smaller resolution than that. All right, so we see just a question that Nick had from says, Greg, any luck with the thing that I emailed you about? And this was a question about like probability for MIDI editing. So let me just go to like a quick MIDI track here in a different project. So there isn't a direct equivalent of that in Cubase, and what this function was is, I want the probability of this to repeat, and include these notes 60% of the time, 40% of the time, but you might be able to get some similar results using some of the MIDI modifiers, but it's not going to be like, choosing to use this note 60% of the times. I think you might be able to achieve, certain aspects of that. So if you wanted to, let's say if we have a MIDI part here, we could, you could use some of the MIDI modifiers in this. So if you want to introduce kind of randomness, or, as opposed to, which is really kind of, a different approach. It's not called probability, but it could be just, when we go to the MIDI modifiers here, we could just say, I wanted to, transpose by this, or I wanted to, randomize the position, pitch, velocity, or length. And I think that there's even a MIDI, you could probably have some MIDI plugins to do this. So if you wanted to, there's density. So, we could just come over here and apply density. And it's not necessarily to specific ranges, but you could check out kind of the density MIDI plugin. I think it really will kind of get you to the same place, but you could probably also couple the density with MIDI modifiers and say, I want it to, come over here and let's just change the pitch. And you want it to define the pitch here and then run density plugin as well. So I think you get those two things pretty quickly to get like subtle variations. So it's not like sounding like a MIDI loop over and over again. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, so Uno Momento is getting into the food and beverage sharing, and he's giving everyone a pint from Finland. So it's very generous. Thank you. All right, so we see from Richard James, silly question. In my Groove Agent SE5 mixer agent, I have effects rather than the EQ controls that I saw in your version earlier. Why is that, please? All right, so it could, with Groove Agent, there's going to be two different types of kits with it. So, we want to be able to say, okay, so there is a acoustic agent, which will have kind of more of a traditional analog mixer, and then you'll have like a beat agent, and this is more of kind of like an MPC style interface and paradigm. So when we come here and we go to the mixer, we just see these different effects. So if you have an acoustic agent, you get kind of more of the traditional analog mixer. And with a beat agent, because of the workflow, they often make more sense here where you could just have different aux sends and inserts that could be accessed for the different outputs here. So that's why you may notice the visual difference, because the beat agent and acoustic agent will have different functionality in the mixer sections. Okay, so I just see, hi Greg, can I assign a key command? And as soon as I was reading it, my chat field jumped on me. All right, just trying to find where I was. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so the question is, can I assign a key command to insert a plugin on a specific track? So we could assign a key command to process the audio from a selected track, but not to place it as an insert. So if I wanted to, like, let's say I have this audio file here, we could go to key commands, and then we could see it might be like under process plugin, and then all of your plugins that you could just kind of process. But I don't think that there's a key command to say go to this track and put an insert on. One thing that a lot of people miss if you're doing this, let's say if you have an audio track, is just, kind of a clever way of doing this is, let's say, if we go to Media to VST Effects, I could say, oh, I just want to do a pitch shift plugin that you could just drag and drop that plugin, and that will place as an insert, but not from, I don't know of a way to, open up the insert, select insert slot 3, and then have it go to this particular plugin. And it could be problematic because you could insert a plugin but not have insert slots, and then what happens in that situation. So I don't know of a way, but I'll pass along as something that people want to accomplish and do. Okay, so we have a question. I think this is about our MIDI record modes we showed earlier. Thank you for my question. For one more thing, how can I repeat recording that modulation until I keep one of them instead of 4 or 5? Okay, so let me just jump back here. All right, so I'll switch this back to like a string patch. Okay, so I'll solo this, and I'm just going to record. All right, so we have our little melody, and I had set to auto quantize, so let me just turn that off. Okay. So now at this point, I'm going to set my MIDI record mode to merge. And I'm going to record, let's say, modulation data on top. Okay, and let's say if I want to, now since we have that MIDI data there, let me just go ahead and re-record. So now I'm just kind of, all right, so let's see, so that was kind of two parts fighting each other. So let me just switch. All right, so let's say if I, all right, so kind of fighting between the existing modulation data and what's going on. So I guess one way you could, we could just choose to erase all of the modulation data as we re-record it. You could make a macro if you wanted to, to duplicate, make a new track version and re-record. So let's say if I wanted to make a macro to duplicate this without the modulation data. So let's come over here and let's see if there's a logical editor preset for deleting modulation. Okay, I'll just create one. So let's say we want to delete, and I know that this is a workaround, but if you don't want to erase it, we'll say type is equal to controller value 1 is going to be 1, and we'll just call this delete modulation. Okay, so I saved that as a preset. So what I want to do is let's come over here to our key commands and create a macro. And I was just going to take one other, so let's just say. So there's also just kind of a delete controllers if you wanted to, just that function, but if it was like for a particular controller. So I want to go to track versions. We'll make a new macro. Okay, so I'll duplicate the version. And now we'll go to our logical editors. And it's going to be under process, process logical editor preset. And see what I call the preset. All right, let me just find that preset, what I called it. Sorry about that. Stupid brain cramp. All right, so. Okay, I'm going to save this. Okay, so we'll just come right over here. Okay, so we'll say, all right, so we'll say our new recording no CC, and then we're going to now come over here and choose delete modulation and add. All right, so now when I run this particular macro, if you wanted to speed this up, we could just kind of come here. so new recording, no CC1. Okay, so we'll come here to the macro. If we did this right. So now we have a new track version that we could just kind of come over there and do that. So, but also just very easily, you could just get to the MIDI and under functions, just say, delete continuous controllers, and you could do it like that as well, and overdub your particular new recordings. And I'll see if there's like a way of just overdubbing just MIDI CCs. Okay. Reading through comments. So thanks for all the great questions. Again, if you learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. All right, so we see Charles K joining us. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. All right, so we see what's the best Steinberg equivalent to a Focusrite 2i2? I'd like something that is USB-C and optimal for use with control room as well. So check out, probably the equivalent would be a UR22C. So that'd be a great audio interface for that. Okay, so we see when making a MIDI performance, do I always have to draw an event for the key editor to show up? Is there an option to have it just appear as I record? So, if you want to, so let's say if I'm here and I have just a synth bass part, so, as you record parts in, so let's say if I'm directly here, I'll just record. The part will just. So then the part is created, and then you could double click in the key editor. But if you wanted to record into the key editor, it kind of needs home. So we could think of it, it's like you have to build a house to put the room in or to put the studio in the house. The house has to be built first. So we could think of this as a container part. One shortcut that a lot of people miss often is, let's say we have our left and right locators between events. So if I wanted to quickly just record right there, I could just double click and that will on the project window, and that will set an empty blank part between the left and right locators without you having to draw an event in. But the event is automatically created after recording, and then that could show up directly into the, that will, then you could just double click and you're in the editor directly there. So you don't have to start with a blank editor. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see a question about the chord track. How to extract audio infos from a track to put in chord track, an audio track. So currently, if you wanted to do that, it only will do automatic extraction from MIDI information and not from audio tracks. So currently, the chord track isn't automatically set up to extract audio from, to extract chords from an audio track just for MIDI at this point. Maybe in the future, who knows? All right, so we see Graham Witchers joined us from the UK, from Royal Wootton Bassett, I believe, if memory serves me correct. Thanks for joining us. All right, Mark Rabin wants everyone to indulge themselves by hitting the like button. See Steve Allen just comment it's about our drums. Thanks for confirming, Greg. Been staring at outputs too and not using the master, but my OCD hates having unused track in the mixer as I can't hide it. We'll use master as room output. So yeah, you can do that. And, I think, if we're here and we wanted to, so this was getting back to our question on the Groove agent. So let's say if we're here and we have the outputs, so I will just export this to the mix console. So now we have our multiple outputs here. And let me just see if I can hide it. So if we get to the visibility, so just seeing if it would show up here in the visibility, but it doesn't, looks like it's just going to be there. So, but yeah, I can see where that could be annoying. And let's see if I just come over here. Yeah, and we can't disable the track because it's kind of a sub track of that. So yeah, I'll mention that it's that it's bothering your OCD. I'm sure we have developers and product design people with OCD as well. So. Okay, so we have a question. In F3, the mixer, the top hardware tab now disappears when selecting an input. In F4, from the URRT2, fix selecting a different drivers and then reloading the Yamaha ASIO Y. Thank you. All right, so let's go take a look at it here. So let's say I'll just make sure I have my inputs defined here on all right, so we'll just come over here to 1 and 2. Okay. Okay, so we go to our F3. And let me just go to my routing. Okay. Okay, so I'll just reread this again. In F3, the top hardware tab row disappears when selecting an input from the URRT. So let's say I will come over here. Let's get to audio 1. Okay. So when selecting input F4 from the URRT2, try fix. Okay, so it says the hardware tab row disappears when selecting input in F4 from the URRT2. So I just kind of have it set here, and it seemed like, that was able to take without it disappearing. So it just says the top hardware tab row disappears when selecting input in F4 from the URRT2 for selecting a different driver. Fix, selecting different drivers, then reloading the Yamaha ASIO Y. So let me know if I'm doing something different, but it seems like I could just select the input that is defined from the audio connections right here. So, and it didn't seem like it disappeared or closed on me. So let me know. All right, so we see JVI has made the live stream. Just thanking for having the Hangouts. Okay, so I just see a question. Would like to know how to merge MIDI and audio into one lane. Example by playing synths or other outboard instruments. So it may not put it into one lane, but let's say I have, let's say if I go back to, so yeah, well, it may not be one lane. If you want it, it sounds like maybe you want to have the MIDI and audio simultaneous. So if I want it to come here, I could add a group channel to the selected channel. And I'll add a group channel to the selected channel, and we'll, all right, so, and what I want to do now is I'm just going to create an audio file, an audio track, and we'll make this stereo. But I want its input to not come from my audio driver, but to come from group 3. So at this point, I'll say, okay, we'll have group 3 here, and I could place these into a folder. So as I record now, so now what I've done is recorded just the audio and MIDI simultaneously. And then now that they're both in a folder, I could move the folder and they'll be linked internally. So if we wanted to just listen to, just the audio or listen to just the MIDI, we could come over here and be able to. So that's one way to do it. And if you wanted to, minimize the folder, you could now have audio and MIDI simultaneously in one lane if you wanted to treat it that way. So, but generally they're going to be two different types of information, but if you want them to be coupled together like that, you can set it up. So let me know if that makes sense. All right. All right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, is there a way to render in place or export multiple events on one track as separate files in MP3 format? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so let's say I have these files here. So what I want to do, so render in place would automatically, so if we wanted to, let's see if we could do this with cycle markers. So I'll add a quick marker track. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to go to our export audio mixdown, and I wanted it to be just our future. Okay, so this is our file, and I wanted this to be set to MP3, and let's do cycle markers. All right, and okay, and we'll just put this into our desktop. Okay, so let's come over here and export audio. Okay, and let's look, see if they're on my desktop. Go to recent files. Let's go to, and there's our MP3 files that were automatically created. So, so put cycle markers around it, and then you're able to export. And as we do your export audio mixdown, you want to enable cycle markers, turn cycle markers on, and set this to MP3 in a file type. And then you could do that. There is a function in Nuendo for export selected events that could do that a little easier without having to set cycle markers. But if you just do cycle markers, and you could just click on the letter P to move to left and right locators, and then insert a cycle marker, and you can do that pretty easily. So give that a shot. So we see, in what aspects is Cubase better than Reaper? So I don't know Reaper at all, so I've never run it, but I imagine that they probably don't do live streams twice a week for 8 hours helping customers. So, but I don't know the software. So, but I think you'd find Cubase would be kind of usually is a company that is the innovative company that's always kind of defining the feature sets for other companies. So Steinberg usually has really good ideas that get copied by other companies and not implemented as well. But I don't know Reaper well, so. All right, seeing next comment from Graham Witcher says, this forum/live stream is arguably the best one ever on YouTube. We are a great family and friends. Greg made this, and more importantly, we all respect each other. So that's a great comment. So it is a really wonderful community, and I'm proud just to be a part of it. So thank you, Graham, for a nice comment. All right, so we have Walter checking in from St. Louis Club Cubase. I hope you're well. Great to see you again on the live stream. Mark Raven has a new orange guitar cable from eBay. He's excited. All right, so it just says, can you just open Cubase 12? So no, not until it's released. I'll have a bunch of Northern Germans will seek me out, and then I won't be able to do live streams again. They'll take the my ability to do this and communicate with people away probably. But I know it's frustrating, but it's coming. And as soon as it's out, if I showed it to you, it could just irritate you because you'd want those features. But, when it's out, we'll show you all the stuff. So we're not trying to be coy or anything about it, but stuff is, in software development, stuff could be changing every day. So if I showed you something that wasn't in the release version, then people would get mad or whatever. So all right, so we have a question. What happens for e-licenses, Portico, Pad Shop, etc., stuff after the migration? Are they migrated or just stuck in a key forever? So the existing licenses will be able to be used on a key. So you'll be able to use the e-licenser if the license is on the e-licenser key, then that will, when it goes to look for that license, it will, like for Portico plugins, it will just say, okay, we have the valid USB e-licenser, so the license will work. Pad Shop is part of Cubase, so I would anticipate that if you had Pad Shop license, that the Pad Shop 2 would automatically just work under your Cubase license because it is a part of Cubase. So, and eventually I think all of those programs will be migrated. It is a huge task. So, we saw it with Dorico first, rolled it out with that. We were rolling it out with Cubase next. So, and other programs will be coming shortly thereafter. So, okay, so we have a question from Michael Teams. If you double track a lead vocal, 2 mics, 2 different tracks, and want to vary audio some of the vocals, can you do this as a single process? So the vary audio is going to be on a file by file basis. So you'd have to kind of do the vary audio edits to both of them. So what I know some people do is just have 2 different vary audio editor windows open to compare. And that works pretty well. So, see, Jeff Sabelski says one of the most helpful. Let me just find a comment as my chat jumped on me. All right, so you see, if here I found a comment from Jeff Sabelski, which was really nice of him to say, one of the most intelligent decisions by Yamaha/Steinberg to make available to us our own Yoda and offering Greg's experience and demeanor for all of us. So I'm just glad to be able to help people. I used to do this more in person and travel all throughout the country and, up to other countries as well. But it's nice to be able to reach so many people. Like I would be the guy who would fly from DC area to LA, work for a whole day, do a couple presentations and fly back that night on the red eye. So, but it's nice to be able to kind of do this in this format. And so it's been really great. So, and I'm thankful that Yamaha and Steinberg just allow me to do it. I don't think they planned too much of it. They just kind of let me do my thing, which is nice. So. Okay, so we have a question from David Griffiths. Hi, Greg. In Groove Agent 5 standalone, I'm not able to get my Keylab Mark II drum pads assigned to kit pads, even though they are assigned from C1 through for 16 notes upwards. Any idea why? So, if you are running Groove Agent, let's see if I could open up the standalone. So sometimes, drum pads may be on different they might be on a different MIDI port. I've seen that. So let's see if we go to Groove Agent SE here, or I'll just do the full Groove Agent, and I'll try it with my drum pads on my Nectar P4 here. All right, now let's do this whole Mac OS security. So let's. All right, so let's say I just want to set my MIDI, and I'm going to set this to all MIDI inputs, and I'll load up a kit, and I think this will work the same for okay, so now we're playing this, and let's get to my drum pad. So I'm not doing anything differently. So my drum pads for my Nectar are automatically just triggering it. But make sure in your controller that the it could be like a different port when you're here. So if you have it set to all MIDI inputs, or if you have it set to, like, you know, on my Nectar, I could have multiple MIDI ports set up here, and I may not necessarily, you know, so check that. But you could try in all MIDI inputs. If while in Cubase, you could also just make sure that it is transmitting C1, and check when we go to an audio or to a MIDI track, go to the MIDI insert plugin, or I'm sorry, the MIDI monitor plugin rather. And now as you hit, you know, you should be able to see what MIDI notes are actually being transmitted there, and make sure that it is set to the right MIDI notes. But if it's the same port, the same channel, all that should work. Sometimes I've seen some drum pads where it's on MIDI channel 10 because it's drums, and, you know, the Roland MT32 had drums fixed on MIDI channel 10. So some controllers may immediately go to MIDI channel 10. So, you know, sounds like, you know, so I would check those things out. All right, so we have Rich Schweitzer checking in from South Florida. Thanks for joining. All right, so we just see a question. How can I make a bus channel for a Vocoder plugin in Cubase 11 LE? So, you know, if you want to make a bus channel, you could probably just come over here, just right click, and you want to add a group channel. So, you know, different terminology, but same thing. So we could add group channels. And then within that particular group channel that's just been added, you could go to the inserts, and, you know, open up the vocoder, and probably what you need to do is to have a MIDI track. So most vocoder plugins will have a MIDI port. So add a MIDI track, and on the output of the MIDI track, you want to have it set to the vocoder output. And that way you could have kind of the MIDI information for the voicings carry over. All right, so we see a question from Tiago. Once I open an audio event on Sampler Track, how do I record the processed audio as a new audio file, i.e. automate the cutoff, and I want the processed audio in project as an audio file? So really all you have to do at that point is, you know, you could just render in place. So let's go take a look. Okay, so let's say if I'm Okay, so I'm just going to drag the sampler track, like that MIDI note, down. All right, so let's say I wanted to come here, and we'll just open up our filter. All right, so I will go ahead and just record this. So let's say I want it, and now I have like my filters. So I will place this in record. All right, so, and I'm going to automate that. So I'll just automate the sampler track. So let's say I'm here, I'm recording. Okay, so now we have, so if I do this, and let's come right over here and do a render in place. So at this point, we'll go to our render settings, and we'll say, okay, I want my complete signal path. We could choose to mute the original one, so I could just come right over here, we'll say render. And as we do this, we can now have our audio playback. With all the filter sweeps. We'll see some more filter sweeps coming in. So that's all you have to do. So just treat it like a normal virtual instrument. You can have it automated and then just render in place. All right, so we just see, Greg, what might be some of the things new, this is a question from Jeff Sabelski, what might be some of the things newer users are missing when doing searches in MediaBay or Groove Agent? Example, me not finding as many 3/4 samples in Groove Agent 5 that you previously displayed, thanks. You know, sometimes, you know, when I'm discovering something, you know, as I learn new software, you know, it's always, you know, I try to go through the same process as a user does, and maybe that enables me to explain it better because I kind of go through the same journey and the same process. So let's say if we have a Groove Agent here, you know, just take a look at, you know, like, you know, one way of doing it is, you know, with software, you're never going to really destroy anything. So, you know, see what happens when you come over here and say, oh, what does this button do? You know, I see this keyboard. Oh, you know, so just kind of, and a lot of times, you know, you'll get like a little hint just coming over here, just hovering over particular parameters and being able to now, you know, just get to the point where we could you know, navigate pretty easily. So, you know, always kind of be curious and, you know, like, okay, I'm here. What does this button do? What does this do here? Okay, that's the MIDI follow on and off, or this is, you know, so I kind of tool around, you know, because each of these things will be placed in for a particular reason. So, you know, that's one way to kind of discover some new functions. And, you know, once you're here, like you have parameters, but if you see a little drop down menu, it's like, oh, you know, this metadata could be applicable for so much more than what's given, but, you know, you only have so much space to show things. So that way, you know, like at this point, this is why I added, under musical, I just added signature or moods or key, So, signature is a way to just look for 5/4, 3/4, 6/8 patterns, stuff like that. All right. So we just see when selecting a group of individual tracks to a group track, should the individual tracks be pre or post fader? So I don't think it really matters. So either way, the outputs can be sent to the group. So it's really, so I don't think having it pre or post fader is going to make a difference really. All right, so you see Elvier just saying I started with Cubase 1.0 and an Atari. I think it was 1990, so it's probably 89 was when it was first released. So that's great. You have me beat. I started on Cubase version 2 for Atari, so it's kind of grown up a bit. So. All right, reading through comments. Let's see. I just see from Elvier just saying there was a phrase synthesizer. I lost my brain with it. Yeah, so that was the famous interactive phrase synthesizer. So that was actually developed by Werner Kracht, and Werner is still with the company. He was, his name, was in the about screen of Cubase 1, and still with the company after all these years. Probably it's going on almost 48 years, or almost 40 years, probably 38 years with the company. So he's an amazing developer. He's really kind of changed the face of MIDI production for so many people. And I believe he created the Logical Editor project, Logical Editor. So. Okay, just. All right, just reading through comments here. All right, so just seeing anyone having this issue with Cubase 11, and when I open it, sometimes it doesn't remember my output sound card for control room. On previous versions, didn't have this issue. So, generally mine's been really good, but it was reading further down. The JVI sometimes has a problem with his UR44, but if you could let us know which OS you're running, because sometimes, as you add things like, maybe a microphone or a display, they could have an audio component, and sometimes that can mess up the order of stuff with audio connections and how the operating system is seeing it, especially on Mac OS. So. Okay, just reading through comments. My chat field jumped on me. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so just seeing comment, like with the Logic sampler, like creating a wobble sound with the sample, like you raise and leave that LFO that I found really cool in Logic, but I stayed always true to Cubase. So you could kind of do that with this, with the filter in the sampler track and assign an LFO to that as well. So. Okay, so we just see, can you demonstrate a flexible routing workflow that will allow quick and painless stem export? My current routing workflow doesn't seem to jive with the new stem export function. Thanks. So, there could be different ways of accomplishing this. So let's say, if we're doing, let's go to this project here. We'll take a look. So if you could tell us like what's not jiving, that would be helpful. But what a lot of people will have set up, is stuff going into groups. So I'll just open up this project. It just has a lot of different elements of MIDI and audio together. So when we go to actually look at our export audio mixdown, some things that people miss. So here we have our group channels, our effects channels, instruments, and audio channels. One of the things that could be critical once you're in multiples, with your effects, we could say, okay, I want it disabled and this will be dry, and your mono track stay mono, your stereo track stay stereo. You could include inserts and the channel strip. So that would be the EQ as well as inserts. You could add sends or add the sends and master. So, so there's different scenarios in the effects, but, could be applied to each of the individual files. But if there's some aspect that's not working, let me know and we could try to figure it out for you. All right, so I just see from Elvir, just saying, I just found amazing what Greg is doing with Cubase Pro 11, like something with a timing on a MIDI part, but didn't understand it correctly because my English is too bad. Sorry. If you could kind of remind me like what I was doing, I might be able to explain it better. Sorry about that. All right, so just see, says I want to use my Arpeggiator Vocoder plugin in Cubase LE, but I can't make a sidechain channel for the mic input. So I don't think that Cubase LE has sidechain capabilities. I think it is in Elements and higher, but I could be mistaken. But I think that sidechaining was just introduced in Cubase 11 down to Elements, but it might be the artist version. But I don't think that the LE version, which is bundled with hardware, has sidechaining capability. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to close/open all folders with a key command or a click? Thanks, from Jan. And since Jan does such an amazing job with the Cubase index, I'm going to close all my folders here. All right, so we have lots of folders, and I'll just hide my lower zone so we can see lots of folder love here in this project. So this is great for organizing. So let's say as we work with this, I think we go to the project menu, and then there will be track folding that you could, at this point, you could say unfold tracks, and now everything will be unfolded. Or if you get to the project and this is from keyboard shortcut, you can say fold tracks, and everything that was in a folder will now be folded again, you know. So just, you'll see fold and unfold tracks from track folding. So you could just do that and assign those to, or flip the fold states is another option. So try that, Jan. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to get the MIDI modifier random pitch to only use pitches from the scale defined in the chord track? All right, let me jump to another project. So I'm just going to revert this quickly. So I think we might be able to couple it. So let's say if I wanted to just move this out of the way here real quick. Sorry. All right. Okay, so if we have, let's say, an event, like a part here, you know, we could snap the live input, and this could be done from the editor scale or from the chord track if a chord track is there. So let's say, okay, I only want this to be in the key of C, and let's come over to our track settings. So there, let's say the MIDI inserts. Oh, so it looks like even here we could just choose to scale within the MIDI modifiers. So let's say I want to randomize pitch. And we'll have that go like an octave and a half, and velocity. Sorry about that. And so, and then we could just choose within. So, you know, it looks like you could just kind of do the modifiers here directly to the scale, and you might be able to couple that once you're in the editor to snap the live input and quantize the pitches directly that way. And let's see if we go to the track inspector. Oh, you could actually just record these settings. So you could just come over here and have these, you know, snapped to your different pitches and scales here. So you could play around with that, but also once you have that live input in the inspector, you could choose to have it automatically snap to live input, or even do it after the fact and quantize pitches. So you see Jeff Sabelski wants a default like video folder for video export. So I'll mention that. All right. So we just see, is there a way to set question? Is there a way to set permanent settings in Groove Agent? I find myself having to reset up MIDI follow, full level, etc. Would be nice if we could do that. All right, so let's come. All right, let me just go to like a Beat Agent kit. Okay, and let me just make sure I have the so I don't know if you're starting from presets. Let's see if this is saved as a preset with those settings. Let me just add a blank instrument, or if you're using all factory presets. So let's say if I come here and I'm just going to reset up MIDI follow, full level, etc. Okay, so if we want this, and let me see also if there's keyboard shortcuts that can. And let me just see if this is automatable. Okay, I'm gonna go to quick controls here and click on learn and see if it doesn't look like it's an automatable parameter. I don't know of a way to make that kind of permanently set. Sometimes there might be keyboard shortcuts. Let me just. But sometimes, but I don't know a way to do that. But I could take a look into it if you want to send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, thanks for all the work and info, really appreciate it. I have a question about inserts panel and the inspector. Is it possible to change the number of insert slots? In the mix console, you could uncheck fixed number of slots option, and it shows you however many slots you're actually using. It'd be great if we could do this in the inspector panel too. So yeah, currently it's fixed, and this is kind of an older, and I was just having discussions on this particular feature with some of my German colleagues this week, about, if you're using 2, that you don't need to see 14 empty insert slots. So, currently it's going to be fixed. We're having discussions on how to optimize that for future releases. as well. So. All right. All right, just reading through. Okay, just seeing from JVI, just says Win 10 Pro, Cubase 11 Pro, UR44. What happens to me is that Cubase jumps from Yamaha Steinberg USB audio to generic low latency ASIO driver. What I don't understand is why all the saved audio card preferences, in and out preferences, and key commands disappear altogether, all just gone. So I've seen that sometimes, like, there's different components, with that are installed as part of the integration with like the UR44. So with the UR series, there's a UR extension, and that provides the link for some of the more advanced integration. So if you do run into that, try reinstalling. When you get these the UR44 driver, and you download it, you could install all, but you'll notice that there will be different folders for driver or extension. So try just reinstalling the extension, JVI, and that should refresh it for you. All right. So we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to glue audio parts together? All right. So it could really, when we come here, if we have these set to different events, so say these are, different events, and I wanted to treat them as one single entity. If I grab my glue gun and glue these together, so now I do this. So now this switches it from an event to a part. So now I can move these events just like so. But now each of these will still be, if we had 3 separate files, there would still be those 3 separate files that are contained within a part. So if I want to undo that function, but another way that you could use to glue is just to go to audio, and we'll say bounce selection, and we could choose to replace events. And now we could have a brand new audio file that contains, the components of each of those files. So you could use the glue gun just like you do on the project window, but realize that when you do that, it's going to take it from an event to a part, because the part is a container for multiple events, so that you could easily group them together for editing. But you may lose some functionality on the project window. So for like doing fade handles, you could do that in the part editor. So we would have to double click here, and we could launch what's called the part editor, and then our fade handles would show up directly in the part editor there, as opposed to on the project window. So let me know if that makes sense. See Graham Witcher just thanking Jazz Dude for all his contributions to the Hangout. So I'll echo that comment. All right, so we see JVI had his revelation of the day. It's like the project menu folding, unfold, fold, revelation of the day. So it's always a good one. Sometimes it's the easy ones that are impressive. All right, so we have a question. Cubase 11 Pro will work seamlessly on the M1 or M1 Max chip, won't it? So yes, it will. You know, some of the components will be running under Rosetta, and realize that Cubase 12, there's been, you know, so much time has been utilized to having it work fully in to have it, you know, M1 native, you know, but there's still lots of third-party components that aren't M1 compatible. So you know, some of those may be running in Rosetta depending on what third-party components you're utilizing. Okay, so we have a question. Can you recommend a strategy for managing project size, how long to keep .back files, pros and cons of keeping them, other cleanup routines? What do you do? You know, so, you know, I don't generally work on, like, you know, commercial projects anymore, just because I'm busy with the job, and don't have time. But what I would generally do is once I have everything cleaned up, and let's say I needed to hand an archive off, like a project to the client, what I would do is come over here and I would just do a backup project. And that places all the content into a unified folder. So if I had audio files that were just kind of scattered, it also allows you within one operation to minimize the audio files. So if you recorded, you know, 400 guitar solos and you're never going to use the 397 unused takes, that you don't include those. And if you know, have a 10-minute recording that you have 3 seconds of in the project, you don't have to back that up. And so that's a very clean way of having just the files you need to play back that project. So that's what I would pass on to a client and say, here's your, you know, these are your files. Have fun, enjoy. And then I would keep a backup of that. So it's the same thing as a client, because they will inevitably lose their projects and call you up like 10 years later. And that way you have exactly what you gave them, and it's just copying it to a drive very easily. As far as, like, you know, once a project is done, I still kind of come from the generation of computers where we did save as. So I may do different project folders. I generally don't keep a lot of my backup projects once the project is done. So that's how I kind of approach it. So I would make a personal backup project, you know, for the client, and maintain that as well. And, you know, if, you know, they come back 10 years later, or, you know, and I did have this happen where a client, you know, it's like, oh, now, you know, I did like a piano instruction book, you know, it's like, oh, and now take the pianos out. And it's like, you know, oh, I had to go into 400 project files and mute the piano parts and re-render all of the files, you know. So luckily I just had to pull up an old computer that I did, you know, and instead of, like, you know, trashing computers or getting rid of it, just, you know, keep all your old computers as long as you can as well, if you need to pull up projects. Because I have friends that, you know, will need to pull up like advertising jingles from 25, 30 years ago that the client wants, and they expect all the sounds to load up again. So, but other people could share who are working in more of a commercial environment what their strategies are as well. Okay, just finding my spot again here. Thanks for all wonderful questions. And again, hit the like button if you learned something new. or just learned a new tip or a better way of doing something, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Yeah, and Jazz Dude makes a great point on this. In times of 1 gigabyte for 25 cents for spinning hard drives, keep all the files, you know. So that's a great point. You know, it used to be, you know, like when a 1 gigabyte drive was, you know, like when I got to like, you know, it's like, wow, it's $300. Unbelievable, you know. So drive space usually isn't an issue. All right, Uno Memento is he's giving everyone a second pint. So it's a good thing it's late in Finland. So. All right, so we see Gareth is on the live stream. Thanks for joining. All right. All right, so we just see a question. How can I delete the slur/slurs if I already saved the project with them? Can I delete them after the save? So I assume this is in the score editor. So let me just... All right, so let's say I'll just come here and I'll just record a quick melodic part that I'll add slurs in. So let's say I now want to come over here and reset my quantize because I left my auto quantize on by default again. So, all right, so we want to look at this in the score editor, and I'll just do a quick clean up. Okay, so let's say we have slurs. So I'm going to come over here and let's insert the slur between those events. And I'll just put this into our page mode. Okay, and all right, so if we have the slurs here, I think we just grab the eraser tool and let's see if maybe not. Okay, so I just selected the slur. So let's come over here, and the slurs are kind of in a green color. So I'm going to just select the slur like this and then just hit the delete key. And then the slur will be deleted. Okay, so we have a question from Gareth. Could you go through expression maps a little bit? All right. So many libraries to have more realistic musicianship of how a actual human being would approach playing a part will offer, additional articulations, so that when we go to, let's say, our violin part and we play, that we'll go look at our expression maps. And so many times when we go to the expression map and we look at violin 1, we can see that these are the available articulations that we have. So when I hit this switch, it would automatically go directly to this particular articulation. So I'm going to just check my octave here and just make sure to see if I'm in kind of the right octave for this particular part. Since I have a 49 key controller on my desk, so. Okay, so let's say. All right, so I'm going to transpose down. Okay, so now. So as I want to come over here and I could switch. So when I hit like an A-1 note, I could get a trill. When I hit an A#1 note, and let me just make this a little louder so we could. So if I hit an A1, I play the note, I get that, I get spiccato, trills for halftone, tremolo. So at this point, you say, okay, let's play C#. We could get all these. So all of these sounds in different ways that a violinist would play note would be incorporated here and available as samples. So when we want to use these, instead of having each of those sounds to a different track, we come over here to our note expression. We could, instead of looking at your velocities, we could look at the note expression data. So at this point, we could, see all the articulations listed here and say, okay, I wanted this to be, pizzicato for that note, back to legato, back to pizz, back to legato, so that each of these particular notes, we could have it play different styles for strings. So I could say, okay, here I want it to be spiccato. I wanted this note to be a trill, back to pizz, and then back to legato. So at this point, so that's what the note expression and the expression maps allow us to work with, just like that. Okay, so just see a question. I was wondering about the right-click menu that now has the tools in the top in a folder. Will there ever be a custom setting or revert back to the way they used to be, just be there at the top? So yeah, this was kind of like a redesign, and if you are familiar with the old one, we could see kind of context-sensitive functions and tools used to all be together. Some people felt that it was like a little overwhelming. I personally preferred the older extended toolbar. And I'm still kind of lobbying to try to get it back to previous states. But so I tended to migrate it to using just a small pop-up toolbar. I don't like it as much as like what was in 9.5 myself. but I'll pass it along. Okay, so we just see, so question, how can I change the clef on piano part from bass clef to treble? Double clicking and changing the clef on the first bar doesn't work, just on the second, and it's added in the end. All right, so let's open up a piano piece here. Okay, so usually when we start off, like I had the polyphony, I have this set to split. All right, and let's just see. And I remember seeing a picture of it. So I'm gonna go to my right zone, and I'm going to just select. All right, so let's see if I. So, it could be that we've defined it as a grand staff, but let me just see. And if I wanted to say, we'll just insert the clef change. Here, we could do it kind of like that, but I think it might be because it's actually defined, if you defined it from the staff setup as split point. But let's say if we do this split point in all right, so let me just undo that and let's see if we can hide. So I can get on the second bar. All right, and so say if I hide that clef, and let's see if I could just move. All right, so you could hide, select the, put the clef change in, and then when you come over here, just try moving just the clef over visually and see if that makes a difference. I'm not sure if it will change the settings in the very first part, but it's worth a shot. See, Michael Teams is saying Gareth is famous, so that's good. We get to hang out with famous people in our live streams. There you see a nice comment from says, thank you for sharing all your knowledge. You've helped me out on many occasions over the years, so I'm glad to be able to help. All right, so I just see from Michael, so we have a new tune of Michael's. It'd be great for me to play bass on. So yeah, send it over. Looking forward to it. All right, so we just see Dorco Forge from Jeff Sabelski has the ability to edit in the key editor while having the score editor displayed, each reflecting the edits of the others. I would love that option perk in Cubase and Nuendo. All right, so let's say I have my score editor here. All right, and this could be just a quick preference. So let's say under editing, maybe editors, editor content follows event selection. So if I'm here, so we have the piano part here in score, and let me just move some windows around. So you can have the score and the key editor open simultaneously. And I think if you're on Windows, you could probably dock the windows. So if I come here and make a change, so let's say if I'll just switch tools here. All right, so let's say so you can see that when I move a note here, I could see it move in the editor here as well. So I let go. So let's say I'll select this note here. So you can see the changes between the two editors. So try going to this preference in Cubase, and editor content follows event selection. And I think you could have multiple edit views of the same data simultaneously. Okay, so we have a question. Are third-party expression maps interchangeable / usable with our Steinberg instruments? So generally, you know, the expression map could be tied really to the particular instrument, because what happens is, you know, you switch to an articulation, you know, C# does pits in this instrument, but does halftone trills in a different instrument. So it's really the expression maps, you know, should be kind of set up for each individual instrument. All right, so we see Pablo is on the live stream. So wonderful for you to join. And he's from Galicia, España. So thanks for joining us. We have the whole hot mess contingent here. All right, you see Michael Teams is grilling burgers tonight for dinner. That sounds good. So we have a nice day. So we have like 64 degrees here today, but chance of snow on Sunday. So. All right, so we see Mark Matson's going to check out, and we'll see him next week. Thanks for joining the live stream today. So we see a comment from Mark Rabin. Every time, never fails. Greg shows me something new every single time. I always have absolutely psyched to make something new in Cubase. That's great. I'm glad I could help inspire some creativity and creating music. I think it's a wonderful thing. Okay, so I think I'm caught up with the questions. Let's see. So I see from Keith Young just saying, speaking of hot mess, I can't find the music. What am I not doing? So I think it's 2 T's, but there might have been I thought I saw in the comment like a name change or something, but you could try 2 T's, HOTTMESS. And I'm sure that Gareth or Michael Teams or Pablo could probably share a link. All right, so we have a question. Any updates for Cubase 11 Pro, the last version from September? So, generally after there's a new generation, like after 12 comes out, there's a lot of little things that will get fixed and rolled into like a maintenance release for 11. So I just see a comment from Mark Rabin just saying, Greg, I was thinking it was cool to be able to see you generate some material, like how you would approach a few different genres of music, kind of highlighting specialty uses. So yeah, I would, I welcome if people want to share projects with me that I could use on YouTube without any like copyright infringements or stuff like that. I would love to have new material, so I'm always kind of seeking demo projects from friends and colleagues. Like, oh, this song didn't get picked up and it's a good song. Like, you use it for demos, and that's how we got Beatles and Stones to be used. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to use audio warp in the main window? So currently it's set into the sample editor, but a lot of people have wanted the ability to do it in the main window as well. So Steinberg is very aware of that feature request. So, all right, I'm going to jump over to some questions that we had that people had sent in advance. So thanks for all the great discussion and questions that are going on. And if make sure to hit the like button. So if you hit the like button, that would enable us to continue to do these live streams and offer this as a service. So, all right, so let's say our first question mailed in. My name is Ryan, and I recently purchased a MIDI fader to control my expression and volume. But after I recorded songs or any other VST I used a fader on, upon playback, the expression resets to 0, and I have to adjust my faders again to get the expression back up. What can I do to prevent this from occurring? Very annoying and disrupts workflow. So, it could be, sometimes we get this with faders that aren't motorized, where, if the values get reset and then you have to move the fader to a particular position. So some control surfaces will do like a nulling or like a catch mode. But there's a couple preferences to check with this, Ryan. So if we come over here, let's get to the Cubase, to preferences. And I think if we go to editing under MIDI, or maybe just under MIDI itself. Yeah, so there's a whole series of chase events. So, one that you may want to try is to never reset chased controllers or reset on stop. So try toggling those two preferences and see if those can make a difference. So some control surfaces will automatically follow the MIDI CC and be able to do that. So, but try those two preferences under MIDI and see if that makes a difference. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to hear both audio events if they are overlapped on the same track? So you generally not, so, the intention is to have, one sound, one file per track playing at a time. If we wanted to come over, let's say if I have like a drum loop here, one way to do that would be, and I'll just be like a horrible example, but I'll do a bounce selection command here. So let's say I want to take this particular audio file and we'll move it up. And at this point, if you wanted to hear both, you could do so we'll have my vocal play. And then I could. So we have our vocal and we'll see that it will go straight in. Now, if I hit the X key, we could do crossfades, and that would play both clips. But, generally, what if you have multiple clips playing back on the same track, I mean, that's a whole really messy ball of worms where customers will get to the point where all of, it's like, oh, I have, it's like we have a multi-track environment with unlimited tracks. So it's probably not necessary to hear both of them. But if you absolutely needed to hear them, try just to hit, you could do a crossfade and that will allow both of them to play back at the same time. But, it's really a good practice to, think of one audio file playing on one track, because you could go down a really bad rabbit's nest or rabbit hole, like if you have 15 different layers that are on a track and they're all playing simultaneously. It's like, at what point do you stop that? So, but if you needed to hear it, just hit a crossfade and then you could hear both of them. Okay, so I just see any updates on bringing back the local undo function in Cubase. And I did some research on this with Cubase 9.5, and this would allow you to do edits like in the key editor and move stuff around, and then do an edit here, and then go back to the key editor. And when you did this, it would only undo within the key editor. So I passed it along to Steinberg. I didn't get a response to see if there's a particular reason or design decision to bring that out. I know it's useful for a lot of people, but maybe it was, sometimes features like that may just add, like the file sizes can get really big or something like that. So, but I haven't heard any more back. Okay, So we just, all right. So another emailed in question. I'm trying to set up 3 headphone outputs on a control room that share the same physical headphone output on my interface. However, when I try to assign the outputs that are already used, I get this error, and it's about the exclusive device ports for monitor channels. In the preferences, deactivate it. So what am I doing wrong? So when we do the headphones, that in the control room, it's not intended to switch between 3 different sets of headphones. The design intention was really for this to be like, while we're editing, you need to put headphones on for a critical edit while you're mixing, to be able to have a headphone channel that the engineer could use, perhaps, or someone doing editing could use, but not to switch between multiple headphones. Now, if you wanted to switch between multiple headphones, you may want to just set up Q mixes here and have the headphones on the Q mixes. And I think this was also wanting to use different, maybe room correction software on different headphones, so you could have like 3 different references. And then if you do that, you could just come over here and listen to the Q mixes. So instead of assigning them to phones, but with that, it's, you may have to have these set up on different physical outputs to work. We'll give it a shot here and just try it. So let's say if we go to our audio connections to control room, the hard part is having those each go through different connections on your audio interface to the same connection. That's a tricky part, but let's say if I want to add Q. All right, and let's see if we could assign a Q to the same output here. Yeah, so it's not going to allow you to do that. If you're wanting to have, let me see if there's, and it just says, why do I want something like this? I'd like to check out Waves, NX, Abbey Road, Ocean Way, and CLA control rooms, simulation plugins. It'd be great to have these on separate phone channels so that I can flip between them in the control room. So if it's going to be with the same connection, what you might want to do is to, instead of doing it through the phones channel, is maybe if we go to the inserts, that you could have, let's see if there's phones inserts. So if we come, we could just have these, let's say, I'll pick a different plugin here. So let's say, okay, let's go to our frequency plugin, and let's say this is our, headphone correction plugin. So at this point, we could say, okay, so I want to come over here. All right, so, on your headphone channel is just to run those as inserts there. And at this point, you could probably just say, okay, I wanted to hear this, I wanted to hear this, and you could listen to your 3 different rooms that are set up. So if you're running multiple instances of that, but the tricky thing is, doing it all on one output. So, but if you have 3 different plugins, I think you could have 8 on the phones channel by itself. And then you can say, oh, this is the Abbey Road, this is Ocean Way. This is, so you could have the different plugin scenarios set there and just activate to check your mix. So if you're going to be kind of just doing it directly from, directly from the actual, using the mouse to select it, I think that is a pretty good solution for that. All right, let me jump back to our live questions that we have. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions and discussion. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is checking out. It's getting late in London. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully we'll see you on Tuesday. Okay, reading through more comments. So I just see over time I've changed the way my mixer window, I changed the way I like my mixer window. Is there a way to save the way I like it so that when I open up an old project, I could load my new favorite setup? So I think once, depending on, the configuration of it, I think if you've if your mix console views have evolved, that this may be stored on a track by track basis. So let's say, okay, so I'll just say fave. But, the mixer could be so kind of intertwined with the project. Let me do a new project here. And I'll add a number of audio tracks. And we'll come over here to the mix console. Excuse me. And yeah, so I think it's going to be tied to the project. But you could probably also come over here if you wanted to go to the file menu and import tracks from project, and that would put it into your new mix console environment if you really wanted to do that. So, but there's so much that could be tied to an individual project if you haven't started with the template. Okay. All right. So just see, about comment about the DSP mix effects controls do not display /load in mix console when in URRT2. So I think, I think it was with the RT series that, once we come over here, let's say we go to, they migrated from the mix console to the inspector. So let's say if I wanted to come over here to, let's say, my audio connections, and I have my inputs, and I assigned all right, so I'm going to add a mono, let's say a mono bus here, and I want to assign this to input 1. Okay, so I now want to have this track. And one of the things that you might have to do, and this is annoying, and I'm not sure why Yamaha hasn't fixed it, is something to be aware of is when you are using the control room, that you might have to, like while tracking, just to set that to not connected and the outputs to connected to the interface. So once we do this, I'm going to take this track, we're going to route it out to our stereo out, and its input is going from mono in. And then once we see that we have all the UR24C, and I think this is the same way for the URRT2, is going to be set right here. So all the DSP functions, instead of being in the main mix console, are in the inspector, which is a little more handy, but it's kind of annoying that you have to bypass the control room. And I brought it to Yamaha's attention many times. All right, so we have a question. Are there built-in groove maps such as MPC swing styles? So, there's a number of ways to do this. So let's say, you can make maps quite easily, take anything and save it as a groove quantized preset. But if you're in like a MIDI editor here, okay, we're doing fine on time. And we have like a number of notes that have been painted in. So I'll do my 20th century composition. That if you even come over here to quantize, you could just set, the swing factor. So if you wanted to just at this point, say, okay, we want to, do soft quantize. We wanted to come over here and swing percentages. And, we could now just come right over here and say, okay, I wanted to adjust my quantize swing. So as you look at parts, we could just have that kind of automatically applied to it. There's also, if you want to do it at the track level, a way that we could just kind of come over to, so when we select a MIDI track here, there's going to be a MIDI plugin as a MIDI insert, and then you could just come right over here, and then there's a quantizer plugin, so you could use the swing feel here. That will get you, very much an MPC or Teddy Riley feel. So you go into New Jack swing, but anytime that you have a particular MIDI event, you say, okay, I really like this particular groove, whether it's, if you do it from an audio loop, we could just go to the quantize panel here and just say, okay, I want to take this MIDI loop, this event, and drag it in, and then you can make your own swing presets just like that. Or with audio files, so if I say, okay, I really like the feel of this particular drum loop, all we have to do is we'll just say, okay, I want to take this drum loop, double click, and we go to the hit points. I could, go to the hit point calculations, and at this point just say, let's create groove, and that could be a groove. So you could extract the grooves from just about anything, or use this, quantizer plugin or swing factors in the actual MIDI editors as well. All right, so we see request for discount on Absolute 4 to 5. So there's usually, different promotions going on throughout the year. So I'm sure that there will be an Absolute promotion going on. All right, so I just see from Kevin Mehmed, so I could try to reach out to you next week. Kevin's going to be kind of a busy week, but I may have some time on Monday. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the questions. So give it a minute or two, and we'll see if there's other questions. And if not, we could wrap up just a couple minutes early. So I want to thank everyone for great questions. We'll be again doing this on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So look forward to catching up with everyone on Tuesday as well. So we see, hi Greg, I figured out how to move the beginning of a boundary of an event to the playhead cursor. It's called move to cursor in the key commands. How do you move the end of an event to cursor? So currently there isn't a function for that, but maybe in the near future. So. Okay, we'll see if there's other questions that sneak in. We're about 10 minutes early, so. But we'll go ahead and wrap up here. I'll just wait a minute. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up a little earlier than normal. But we just want to thank everyone for the great questions. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy. Have a wonderful Valentine's Day. I think we're the day after. It will be our next live stream on Tuesday. So, please feel free to send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And look forward to seeing everyone next week. So take care and have a wonderful weekend.